We're here for episode 2 of 10 Questions With. We had a great time with Chris Robinson on our first episode. A lot of great feedback so far. We hope everybody's at home staying safe. We hope coaches are tuning in today because this is a really important subject. With Jimmy VanOstrand, who's our mental performance coach for the Toronto Blue Jays. And we thought it was really important to have him on with mental illness being and mental performance just being such a big thing, not only at the major league level, but at youth level. So we hope that coaches can take a lot out of it, because we can talk all day about how to pick up a ground ball or how to throw a slider. But the reality is if the mental stuff's not there and you're struggling there, the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. So we're really excited to have Jimmy VanOstrand. He's a former teammate of mine. Always a guy that was a leader. We're really excited to have him as a part of the organization. Jimmy comes from a long playing background, a lot of national team stuff. He was an Olympian, played a big part in qualifying for that Olympics. He's coached at the college level at University of Arizona. He's done some work at Boston College as well. The last 3 or 4 years, he's kind of shifted into the mental performance side of things. He's been with the Seattle Mariners organization, and now he's here with the Toronto Blue Jays. So we're really excited to have him. And, I said this in my first episode, we wish we were on baseball fields right now, but there's a lot of important things going on in the world right now. We're really excited for our organization to be involved in the food drive that we're doing right now with the Jays Care Foundation. And we hope that everybody who's able to in this time can help donate some money towards that to put some food on some tables for some needy families. And, we need to stick together through this to make sure that we all come out on the good side of this. And we'll be out on baseball fields soon. So, but while we're going through this tough time, hopefully this provides a little bit of entertainment and bring some knowledge to you coaches across the country. So without further ado, we're going to start off with Jimmy VanOstrand. Thanks for coming by, Jimmy.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, TJ.
Hey, before we get going, why don't you walk us through kind of like what your role is with the Toronto Blue Jays and how you kind of got into the mental side and away from just coaching and playing, how it got to this point.
For sure. So I guess kind of walk it all the way back and move forward. Grew up in Vancouver, BC. Grew up playing ball up there, played all the way through high school, and then went to a junior college and a 4-year school, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, down in California. After that, moved into professional baseball and was in there for 8 years, and then started coaching. So was very much just thinking I was going to go down that path. Loved coaching, loved being around the game and everything. And then was approached by a gentleman with the Mariners about the possibility of becoming a mental performance coach. It had always been something that I was really interested in, but had never given a ton of thought to. But decided to go back to school at that point. Got a master's degree in psychology and started working as a mental skills coach in the Mariners organization. So did that the past few years, eventually kind of worked my way up through the system. And this will be my first year with the Blue Jays. So this year the plan was to be with the big league club full-time. Really excited about it. Awesome group of players, awesome staff, front office, everybody in the organization. So really looking forward to when we do get rolling, being a part of a great team.
All right, man, that's awesome. So we're going to get into the questions. So basically, I'm just going to read you through questions. These were all sent in from people to our Blue Jays Baseball Academy Twitter or to the website, to our email. So first question comes from Lubo. So his question is, what strategies do you use to get pitchers mentally prepared for the game? And what mental strategies can the pitchers use during the game when things are not going well?
Ooh, good questions. I think to start off with the getting prepared for the game and what do the guys do. Number one, I think it's important to remember that each guy's a little different. I don't think all the guys are using the same strategies. It's not like there's one perfect recipe out there. All these guys do a really good job preparing, but it looks a little different for each one of them. So I think the biggest thing to take out of that, though, that is common amongst everyone is really knowing what their strengths are and knowing how they can use those strengths going into a game. In that preparation is really important. You do the scouting reports, you get to know the other team, all those kind of things, but it's always got to come back to what they do well. And I think that's a kind of a common thread through all the pitchers. As far as in game, when things can get a little challenging, as it always does any game, I think just using a good breath is a really common, widely used, and really good strategy. The ability to take a deep breath, to slow things down a little bit and get back to the present is extremely important. One thing when we're kind of teaching this, or for younger guys, if you can do kind of some kind of little physical action, kicking the dirt, taking your hat off your head, something like that, just a little physical action that requires some concentration. Now that's got you thinking about that. Now you can take your deep breath, kind of get reconnected back to the moment, and then you think about, all right, what do I got to do now with this next pitch that I'm about to deliver? And that lets you sort of refocus on that, get your mind in the right place, and help you go out and perform that next pitch.
Question 2 comes from Terry. Terry coaches a 10U team. For youth, are there techniques or things you can coach to have them understand that failure is a part of the game of baseball?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. Baseball is a really tough game, especially it can be on the batting side just because you don't get hits a ton of the time. But it's tough for pitchers too, right? It's a hard sport. So I think one thing is to remember that just because failure is part of it, you don't actually have to like it, right? So the fact that kids are a little disappointed, a little upset, all these kind of things, that's okay. That's part of it. We don't necessarily want to coach that out of them. Everything's great when you're maybe not performing well or doing all these things. So it's okay to be upset a little bit. That kind of helps you. The thing you don't want to do is sit there in it all the time. You got to accept it and then figure out what you can do, kind of let it go and move on to it. So I think acknowledging that, hey, failure sucks. It's not super fun. It's not how you want it. And that's okay. Just letting them have that moment, but then kind of slowly reminding them, all right, what are we going to do about it now? And we can move on. The other thing with failure that I think is important to remind kind of youth kids, coaches, anybody, failure is up to us how we want to define it, right? Failure is, it's created by our own perceptions, how we feel things are going, what we want to do. So you don't always have to just use the stats. I got a hit or I didn't get a hit, right? There's a lot of other ways that we can define things. Did I swing at the right pitches? Did I make good pitches on the mound? Was I doing the things that I wanted to do to be successful in this game? So just because, people in the stands might see you get a hit or not get a hit, I think a lot of the times the reason the big league guys are successful is because they don't define success and failure the same way other people do. They've got their own version of it. They're a lot more successful than the back of their baseball card might say, and that lets them keep that positive attitude, keep on working hard towards what they're wanting to do.
Absolutely, man. Hey, building on that, talk to me about, obviously you're dealing with, we're talking mostly about coaches that are coaching youth, but just for people at home, how much in your role does a guy just come to you and is just like, man, I'm struggling so much and I just don't know how to get out of it. Do guys kind of come to you a little beat up mentally and look for stuff, or is it kind of one of those things where, it's your job to identify that a guy might be struggling a little bit mentally and you have to go talk to him?
It can work either way. I think it works either ways at times. And I think a really important thing to understand is it's not just me, it's the group of us, right? It's all the players, it's all the staff, so we work collaboratively as a team. It's not just me thinking, hey, I'm watching the game. Who's struggling? Who's doing good? What do we need to identify, right? This is all of us. We're talking with the coaches, using those guys. They're with the guys every single day. We're all together. And really, it's a group effort trying to get the guys to perform well. With that being said, it does kind of go both ways. Sometimes it's you watching and you paying attention, and how the guys are, and just being able over there to maybe get in a conversation and check in, see how things are going. And other times it's the guys coming to you, man, hey, I'm struggling right now. What do you got? And usually you find that they've got the best solutions, Sometimes it just takes talking through things a little bit, slowing things down, putting things in perspective. And these guys are really talented, man. They're really talented. They're really good. They work really hard. They're highly motivated. Just sometimes you need to step back, take a deep breath, recommit to what you're trying to work towards, and get back at it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Next question comes from Todd. Todd's question is, what are the trends and best practices around mental performance training at the major league level? And would there be any high-level takeaways that could be applied to the youth baseball players as a type of training?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest trend right now is just that it's something that is being practiced. It's mental performance training, and training means time. It means investment. It means having a plan, kind of measuring how you're doing, reflecting on it, and seeing if that's working or not working, and then altering that plan. And I think that's the biggest trend you see. The same way the guys are working on their strength and conditioning. Guys are taking care of their nutrition. Guys are doing their preparation, technically, tactically, all that kind of stuff. They're putting in mental work as well. And again, it's different for different guys and what that looks like, but it doesn't show up by accident, right? And I think that for young players, that's important to remember. You're not going to be mentally tough just because you read a book one day and you get one thing and then it just rolls into the game for you. It's hard. The game's really, really hard. And so to do these things is just like anything. You practice it, you work on it, and you get better, and you learn from it. And I think that's the biggest thing you see right now is guys aren't leaving it up to accident. They're not leaving it up to just, over the years you figure these things out. They're trying to kind of speed up that process, get as good as fast as they can right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Next question comes from Jeff. What approaches would you suggest with youth players feeling performance anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. I think number one, it's okay, man. It's okay. Everybody's going to deal with it in some way, shape, or form. And even the guys at the highest level at certain times, or a lot of the time, they're going to be coping with those same things and having those same things going through their heads. So number one, you're not alone. And number two, that's okay that you're thinking those things. And then I think it's good to realize that thoughts aren't facts, right? These things that pop into our heads, these things that we're always hearing, they're not necessarily the truth. And sometimes we take them for the truth. I'm never going to get a hit. I'm struggling. What am I going to do about this? These things, they're going to occur, but that doesn't necessarily make them true. So if we can realize that these thoughts aren't facts, again, kind of accept them a little bit more, separate from them a little bit. You can be thinking these things, and then if we can kind of just give ourselves a little space, put them to the side a bit, and be like, all right, take that deep breath, take that center. Now, what do I got to work on right now? I'm getting ready to hit. I'm getting ready to execute a pitch. I've practiced for this. I've done it. I've done good ones. I've done bad ones. All right, it's going to be one of those two, so it's no big deal. Focus on what I need to do for this pitch and try and do it again. I think one of the best things young kids can do is look at the game pitch by pitch, right? We always hear play the game one pitch at a time, and it's kind of like a cliche. But if you can really learn how to do that and do that really, really well, that's all the game ever is. Now, it's super simple to say play the game one pitch at a time. It's super, super hard to actually do it. But understand those things that are going through your head, thoughts aren't facts. I got to get back to this pitch, and I got to do it the best I can. And the more they practice that and do that, it'll help them a bit with that anxiety. But I think that the biggest thing is just understanding it's hard. The game's hard. Those things are normal. They're okay. And then just kind of accepting with it and trying to focus on what they can do.
Yeah, I love that, man. Thoughts are facts, because, God, I remember conversations you and I having 15 years ago as players where it was like, I'd look at you and I'd just be like, man, I'd do anything for a clean inning right now. And you'd look at me and be like, man, I'm lucky if I get a hit again this month. It's just, those are the things that when it's not going the way you want it to, that's your logical thinking. And you have a way of making yourself really believe that that's the truth. When you can really just sit back and say, my next outing is my opportunity to have that clean inning, and when it comes, it's going to come, and it's going to be great. And same with you, with my next hit is going to come when it comes, and it's going to be great. So
For
I love
sure.
that.
Maybe one little trick too for the youth kids that some guys like is kind of just what you said. Often we're really tough on ourselves, but we're really good at giving the right advice to our friends or our teammates. So just real quick, when you're having anxiety, when you're struggling, when you're worried about, we've all been that guy that's listening to our teammate talking about it, and we generally have some really good advice. Hey, it's going to be all right. Take a deep breath, focus on what you can do. And it's really good training. So maybe if you're having all these thoughts in your head and you're worried about it, think about, what would I tell my buddy right now if he was dealing with the same thing? I tell him it's all right. Take a deep breath, focus on the same thing. So if you can realize that you're having that anxiety and realize you're going through it, take a step back. What would I tell my best friend? And then realize, why are you being harder on yourself than you would be your best friend? You care about that dude a ton. You should care about yourself a ton. Be nice, support yourself, and go on and play.
I love that, man. Next question is coming from Reggie. Good question here. Reggie's got a couple players that have gone through some personal struggles at home. He's asking, as a coach, what can he do to help support them without getting too involved?
Yeah, really, really good question. Really important question, and a tough one. Every situation is going to be a little different. All those relationships that you're going to have with those kids and those families are going to be a little bit different. Sometimes you'll know exactly what's going on, or sometimes you'll just know they're going through something hard and won't really understand it. I think the best thing you can do is, to whatever relationship you have, let them know they're supported, and let them know that you're somebody that can be in their corner. Whatever your ability is or methods are to do that, be yourself, be genuine, be supportive. And that might mean that they use you, and it might mean that they don't use you. But I think it's really good for coaches and parents to understand that perceived support is just as important as actual given support when it comes to emotional well-being. So just because the kid may not use you for support, if they view you as a supportive option for them or a supportive person, that can be just as valuable than them actually using you. And then they will kind of select the time when it's appropriate or you're the right person to support them. So number one, I think just really being there for them is a huge help. And then number two, stay with it. Because especially if it's something a little more traumatic or something significant, there tends to be kind of this flooding and outpouring of support right at the very beginning, where people are really there and trying to encourage and support and help people through. And that's outstanding. But a lot of the time, after a couple weeks or a couple months or things like that, people kind of forget about the circumstances that have gone on. And while it may have lessened a little bit, it's still very real for that kid and still very real for that family. So I think being consistent throughout it's not necessarily just the days, but it's the weeks and it's the months and maybe even the years, So I think be supportive, be there, and then be consistent with it throughout. This might take a little bit longer for the kid to get through. So keep up with your check-ins on them and make sure they're doing all right.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Next question comes from Andrew. It's a long question, but I'm going to kind of just summarize it for you. Andrew's basically asking, obviously in this time of, we don't really know about the future. We're isolated. We're at home. As a mental performance coach, what are you saying to the guys right now to keep them ready and to have them, be able to turn on that switch with short notice? And how can he do that for his kids?
For sure. So I'm pretty lucky. We're pretty lucky with the Blue Jays in that, we've got some of the most motivated, some of the most dedicated, most professional players, staff, personnel on the face of the earth working for us. So although it is a challenge dealing with this adversity, dealing with something that we don't necessarily know how or when it's going to wrap up, it makes it really, really challenging for anybody. But our guys, and that's, players, staff, everybody, I think one of the things we're really lucky with is that everybody's highly motivated. Everybody loves what we do. So they're really getting after it. And I think the way that we do that well is is supporting each other and staying in together. We're not trying to stay motivated in a vacuum. Our guys are still talking to each other. The players are talking to the coaches. The coaches are talking with each other. And that's one thing that I've loved in my first year here with the Blue Jays. And I think it starts right at the top with Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, and goes through Charlie and the staff that we have at the major league team, and everybody's in it together. And so I think when you're dealing with a lack of motivation, often we get very kind of internal. But when we use our connections and use the other people that are passionate about the same thing, we can use their power and their motivation. So those days when we're struggling a little bit, we can use them to help us get through. And days when we're feeling good and they might be having a tougher time, they can lean on us a little bit. So I think that's how we're doing it well. I think that works really well for a younger team too. When we try and do it ourselves, it can be really hard, but if you focus on other people and focus on making them have a better day, making them want to play a little bit more, keeping them hopeful and get through it together, I think it helps us heighten our joy when things are good, and it helps us, kind of divide that struggle when things are tough. So I think staying connected is probably one of the best things that you can do, build those relationships, and then when it's time to go, and we'll get out there and get after it.
Yeah, man, stay connected. I think when this first started, people, and you started hearing, like, stay connected with everybody, call people that you wouldn't usually call. You kind of look at it like, okay, what's that going to do? But, you really found, well, as this time has gone on, is like, those are some of the best parts of your day, when you get to see, a face that you haven't seen in a while that you're so used to seeing. And I think it's just so true in life. And, you touched on, the people with the Blue Jays, and from the baseball ops side, even the business side, it's such a passionate group that does start at the top, and everybody's in it to help everybody get through this. And that's what we got to do across the board. So,
no doubt. I think another thing too with that is just emphasizing having fun, right? I mean, You're talking about a 15U team, so these guys are probably pretty decent. They're investing some serious time and getting ready for those seasons, and then that makes it disappointing when things aren't working out that way. And an important thing to remember is, if you're not having fun, it becomes really hard to put in all the work necessary to do all the things that you want to do. So, I think enjoying what you're doing, going out there, playing catch with whoever you're having ability to, throwing a ball against the wall, you got to enjoy these things. And having fun doesn't always mean, the goofing around. That's a big part of it, but you can have fun with the hard work too. You can have fun with a little bit of that grind. I think that's one of the things that, us Canadians kind of have that edge about us a little bit, because we're probably forced to be a little bit more creative at times than some other people. But, make sure you're enjoying it while you're doing it, because this can be really hard, but you don't want it to kind of beat you up too much. Make sure you're having a good time while you're getting after it.
No question. Next question comes from Glenn. How do you support players that are experiencing adversity for the first times in their career? This could come when they've moved up a level and been dominant the year before. How do you deal with something like that?
Yeah, good question. I think number one is just kind of each guy's individual and how they take it and why they're taking it, how they're taking it. So number one is just listen to them. What's going on with their situation? What are the things that are bugging them? Sometimes we as coaches can blow things out of proportion. We might be freaking out that a guy's killed a level and, he's just business as usual. He's just figuring it out. He's going to get back to it. And then the flip can be true too. So I think number one, just really connecting with that player, figuring out what's going on and what they're dealing with. Is it a baseball thing? Is it an outside thing? We're very quick to view guys like in a bubble and forget that they're humans and they're people and they've got, wives, kids, all these other things going on. So I think number one, just finding out what the player's actually dealing with and how they're, how that adversity is showing up and why that adversity is showing up. And then in doing that, it's about connecting that guy with what do they want to do? How do they want to go about it? What are the values that have got them to the place that they're at? Because these guys they're very motivated. They work really hard. They're the best at what they do. So generally it's just kind of letting them take that step back, letting them refocus, kind of re-engage and go out and attack what they're looking to get done.
Awesome, man. Next question comes from Rob. Is there any reading material you would recommend for coaches looking to encourage strengthening a player's confidence?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of good stuff out there. I think, really, I'd say just some of the mental game of baseball books. Ken Revisa has a really good book, Heads Up Baseball, Mental Game of Baseball, Harvey Dorfman. I think for mental kind of skills or mental performance, those are probably your two classic books that are really, really good on the topic. And then I'd say just to kind of experiment and see, what you're interested in. The biggest thing with reading, I think, is that it's got to be something that you feel connected with and you feel interested in. There's a ton of good materials. And so I think it's important that you're reading at kind of the appropriate level that you want to get in and the, types of messages that you're interested in hearing. You can get really nerdy into the science aspect of it. There's a book called The Chimp Paradox that gets into kind of how we function with our sort of more reptilian old school brain versus our logical reasoning brain. You can go down to like Man's Search for Meaning, which gets by Viktor Frankl about enduring the Holocaust, which is kind of a really deep, more philosophical book. Or you can do some like John Gordon's got Training Camp or The Energy Bus, which are a lot quicker reads, kind of something fun, get through some really good concepts, kind of through a short story type thing. So I think the biggest thing is that you're enjoying the reading. You're reading stuff that you're getting benefit out of it. And that's the biggest thing. Reading shouldn't be a chore. It should be something that's helping you feel like you're getting some benefit from it. And then just kind of keep it on going. I think there's a lot of value to reading. And I think there's a ton of good stuff out there. So those are some that I think are good, but there's lots of others.
Awesome, man. What was the book? Question for you. What was the book that like you just read and were like, wow? Like, was there one book that stood out to you that just kind of changed the game for you, or has it just kind of been a collection and a whole bunch of different things?
Yeah, for me, when I was playing, it was The Inner Game of Tennis. That book really helped me with sort of my offensive approach and sort of what, I guess, attentional focus and what you're focusing on, kind of trust versus training, those kind of things. So The Inner Game of Tennis was one that was really, really good for me as a player. As a coach, there have been a lot of books, but I'd say that Inner Game of Tennis is the biggest one for me as a player.
Yeah, Jimmy, for those at home that didn't know this, Jimmy was a big badminton superstar. What did you play, World Juniors?
We had Pan Am Junior gold medalist. We got that in the bag.
Unbelievable. Next question. Coming again, another Rob. What are some of the toughest obstacles for Canadian baseball players you've seen through the years?
I think probably the biggest, one of the bigger ones is maybe just the weather, depending on where you're at, and access to facilities, access to fields. I think there's a lot of great things going on within youth baseball in Canada right now that are helping alleviate some of those difficulties. There's some really good indoor facilities, really good training programs. People are being a lot more creative in how those things are going on. Camps are available, clinics are available. So I think that's something that's really taken big steps forward and continues to take steps forward. But I think it can still be a challenge. You look at what the winter months look like in some of the East Coast or more northern places, and it can be challenging to get outside and do things the same way. But again, that was probably one of my favorite parts. I think TJ, with our experiences with Team Canada and stuff like that, is we came in with this. We've got a unique connection to each other kind of across the country. And I think that's one of the really cool things about being with the Blue Jays, is getting to live that connection again. And we got a little bit of a chip on our shoulders. There's more people in California than there are in all of Canada. And it's just a different situation that way. So I think because of that, it brings some unique challenges to it. But I think those are also opportunities. Every bit as much as they can be challenges. They let us do things a little differently. They might open up some different doors for us. But I think, again, often sometimes our biggest challenges are where our biggest growth and things come from. And that's what I see a lot of Canadian baseball players. It can be a little more challenging at times coming up through systems and things like that. But the guys that want it, the guys that love it, they're the guys that are going to get through, and they'll be better for it.
Yeah, just you hit the nail on the head with like the different mentality. I think the reality is if you're a Canadian and you want to be a baseball player, you can do that. I mean, there's evidence of that across baseball, past, present, and will be in the future. I think it's just you have to work that much harder, and you have to be willing to go into indoor facilities all the time in the winter, and you have to be able to figure stuff out when the weather's a little bit okay and you can get it outside. You know what I mean? So I think when you do make it, and the work that you put in and the time you put in and the obstacles you've overcome, it makes it that much more special. And when you get a group of guys that have all done that and then they're representing their country, it makes for a pretty interesting group for sure.
No doubt. And I think remembering the satisfaction and the joy that you can take from going that extra mile. It might not be the easiest to practice, but you find a way to get it in. You might not have the same things, but you find a way to get it done. I think all those things, taking satisfaction from the journey. One of the best things about baseball and sports in general is they teach us about life and how to kind of overcome things, how to deal with setbacks, how to do all these different things. And, baseball in Canada is no different from that. So I think really enjoying what you get out of that process day in, day out, that can be something that really helps you out for in baseball and outside of it, because there's a lot of great things that come from this game that don't happen between the lines.
Absolutely. Next question comes from Lincoln. It's actually a really good question because I think it's something that we all have to deal with in life when we're in situations and we're managing people or just working as a team. Like, what are some strategies you use to make sure you can provide enough attention to everybody? There might be that one guy that everybody's zeroing in on, that like, hey, you got to work with this guy, but the reality is this guy over here needs some help too. So how do you prioritize and how do you make time for everybody?
Yeah, another great question. I think number one is, again, I'm not trying to do it myself, right? I'm working with a team. With the Blue Jays, we're lucky to have a great mental performance team. There are 6 of us mental performance coaches and then mental health specialists. So we've got a great team of individuals that way. We've got outstanding coaching staffs all throughout our system and at the major league level. So number one for attention is I'm not trying to do it on my own. I'm doing it with everybody. We're all on the lookout for the best for the players, and we want to get the people in the right spots at the right time to help them out. So, sometimes I'm the right person to help, sometimes it's somebody else. But number one, just not trying to do it myself. And then number two is just kind of keeping tabs on the different things. I've got sort of loosely structured ways as far as maintaining contacts and things like that you're paying attention to. But the biggest thing I think is just really actually caring about the people and being there to invest in the relationship, invest in the time. When you see them as your friends and people you generally care about and want the best for them, and they over time hopefully feel the same way about you, then you make yourself available when you're needed to be available. When it's kind of like a spreadsheet or I'm just checking off my Monday contact, if I'm doing that, the player's going to realize that that's kind of eyewash anyways. So I think the best thing you can do is really be there, be present when we're having time together. I'm there in my time together and not worried about the next player I have to talk to or the next thing I have to get to. So I'm really taking advantages of those times that we do have. And then I'm giving them everything I got in those moments. So I think that's the biggest thing is doing it as a team. And then when it is you one-on-one or with a group or whoever or whatever your audience is, bringing your best self to that. Because when you do that, you're going to notice more and you're going to deliver more. And I think by noticing more, you'll see when that guy, hey, maybe he's a little more distant than he would be usually. Or, this guy's really engaged right now, things like that. So you can follow up on something like that. But if you're not totally present in that situation, if you're worried about something else, it's going to be difficult to lock in there. So I think using the bigger team, understanding none of us are trying to do this alone. This is all about the Blue Jays, and we do that together. And then number two, wherever you are, be there and bring your best self that day. And I think that's how you give attention, and you let people know that you're there to help them, and then they'll be able to help themselves better that way as well too.
Awesome stuff, man. Last question coming from Anthony. How can you coach/teach young players to reframe negative self-talk into positive self-talk?
Yeah. Great question. Important question. I think number one is kind of a little bit of education on sort of what positive self-talk is and what negative self-talk is. So guys are aware of what they might be doing. Because the first level of it, what we might be talking negatively to ourselves, but if we don't even know it, it's going to be hard to make any change or any adjustment. So number one is just that education. Instead, some guys will be thinking, I want to hit the ball hard up the middle, and other guys will be thinking, I don't want to strike out. And there's a lot more benefits from thinking I'm trying to what I want to do than what I don't want to do. So number one is just kind of the education on that basic principle. And then number two is working on it. Again, like any of this stuff, it takes time. It's not a magic trick. It's not you learn it and then you shouldn't think the other way. These things are going to keep happening, and when you get into different experiences, tougher situations, you might have trained something really well and all of a sudden it's going to show up again, and that's just the nature of it. So I think number one, understand what you're talking about, really identify it. Just because we might understand something as a coach and a kid nods their head doesn't necessarily mean that they really get what we're talking about. Maybe make them say it back to us, make them explain it, so we know that they understand what positive self-talk versus negative self-talk is. And then from that moment, stay on it. Let them understand it's a process. It's not a right or wrong. And what we kind of measure, we can manage. And if you're taking stock of your self-talk, you can understand that, say I made 15 pitches tonight. All right. I was telling myself what I wanted to do on 10 of them, and 5 of them I was saying, just don't throw this over the middle of the plate, and we can work on getting from, say, 10 out of 15 to maybe 12 out of 15, maybe 13. But I think those are the two big things. One, know what you're actually attacking. And then two, understand that you got to keep working on it and keep getting better at it. And if you put the time in and put the effort in, it won't necessarily be a straight line, but you'll move in the right direction.
Yeah, man, this has been awesome. I've learned a ton. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk about such a important subject. It's something that I think is important to so many people. I mean, so many people, myself included, struggle with mental stuff and go through really rough times. And I think having somebody like yourself on board with the Blue Jays is just going to help our players so much. But this knowledge, being able to pass that on to coaches, and hopefully one or two things that, you said today will affect lives of younger kids across this country with, coaches putting that into practice. So, I can't thank you enough. Before I let you go, Chris Robinson, who was on episode 1, thought it was very important that I ask you a question about what happened in the qualifying game against Chinese Taipei at the end of the game. You played a role in that game, pretty significant role that led to a bit of a bench clearing brawl. So he wanted you to talk about that and share that story with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for teeing me up, Robbie. So there was, we got pretty late in the game. We were down by 1 run, and I was standing on second base, and I've never been the fleetest of foot, but I've always had a big heart. And crack of the bat, clean base hit, and I was going, man. I was going as hard as my feet would take me. Great throw by the right fielder, and I was probably out by about, a good 15, 20 feet. So the gentleman for Chinese Taipei had the ball at home plate, and I thought the best thing for our country at that moment was to try and separate him from that baseball. So we had a little meeting at home plate that was still legal then at that point, and I was not able to separate that baseball. But the Chinese Taipei players and fans kind of took exception to that a little bit. So we had about a 15-minute intermission, we'll call it, with some objects ending up on the field. A lot of my teammates came out and supported me, and that's what we do. And eventually we got back to baseball. Stubby Clapp ended up crossing home plate, beating out an infield single, making his way around the bases, then crossing home plate and cartwheeling to tie the thing up in the bottom of the ninth. We went extra innings and were able to help our team clinch a qualifying berth in the 2008 Olympics. So it was a great memory. Guys on those teams, players, staff, support staff, everybody. It's pretty special, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity that we all had to get out there.
Awesome, man. Well, I won't take up too much more of your time, but I really appreciate you coming by, and we're going to have some more great guests on. We'll be releasing who we'll have coming on, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And when that comes available, you can email questions in to our Blue Jays Baseball Academy Twitter at Blue Jays Baseball Academy, or you can email us at baseball.academy@bluejays.com. But really appreciate you coming by, Jimmy, and hope to catch up with you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, TJ, and go Jays.